let's just come back first of all to Ukraine in this hour. The coalition of the willing, the defence chiefs of those 30 countries are meeting on the outskirts of London today to discuss what they could do in the event of a ceasefire. Are they kind of talking a little bit too soon, because we aren't really anywhere nearer to a ceasefire now, are we, than we were a week ago?
No, but they're not talking too soon. You have to start this very quickly, and you refine it as you get more details out. So the military planners, their role is to plan, and they will have been planning this for a long, long time and planning different options just in case something comes along. And then as you get more negotiations, and this is part of the negotiating process, where there's greater understanding of who can provide what, where, when, greater understanding of the conversations between Trump and Putin and Zelensky, you can help influence that, so you give the Prime Minister stuff to try and influence those conversations that are going on. But you can then give the Prime Minister and the decision makers a dose of reality as to what we can do and what we can't do.
Yeah, don't promise stuff we can't do. And Putin will be more aware of that. What do you make of Donald Trump's offer to take over the ownership of the Ukrainian power plants? Because this has been something that, I mean, it's interesting. It's energy and power plants, things that Putin did ostensibly agree to. There would be a ceasefire at that, not air, sea and everything, but just the energy production. Well, of course, that massively protects and helps Russia more than it does Ukraine, because there's long-range airstrikes from Ukraine on Russian oil depots and that. But when it comes to the nuclear power plants, what's going on there?
Well, it's very interesting indeed, and the Americans have said they've moved on from the mining issue of the rare earth metals. The nuclear power plants, there's two things. They power Ukraine. They also power the parts of Ukraine that Russia occupies, but the waste product from those nuclear power plants is what can be refined into fissile material for nuclear weapons. Aha! And part of the conversation between Trump and Putin was getting an undertaking that Iran was not going to be provided with the capability to annihilate Israel. So that was Trump saying to Putin, don't you dare give Iran a nuclear warhead and everything else. Now, this could be you building up on some of the discussions that have been going on across Europe and in Ukraine beforehand, where some Ukrainian politicians, and I think Zelensky, I'm not 100% certain, turned around and said maybe we should acquire nuclear weapons
because
again.
Of course they originally gave up lots of
Correct.
nuclear weapons were in Ukraine because of its proximity to Europe, and they were given up back in, was it 1994?
Yeah,
it was a long
back in the 90s.
And that was a deal, and there was a deal which was in return for giving those weapons up and back to Russia. Russia, Britain and America would guarantee Ukraine's borders.
The Russian missile technology and the Russian nuclear warhead technology was created by Ukrainian engineers.
So they do have the expertise,
have the knowledge,
or whether those people are still in existence, but that's a different matter indeed. It's very interesting also, the British arms industry has been blocked from taking part in this 150 billion euro EU defence fund. There's been a lot of people up in arms about that, given that we're supposed to be helping, along with France, leading this coalition of the willing. You think this isn't quite as significant as people are saying?
It's not. And it's not a defence fund. It's a fund that people can apply for a loan from. So if you look at Germany's approach, you're still in the EU, one of the leading economies in the EU. They have changed their They've changed the constitution to allow Germany to borrow more money so that they can fund their access to arms, their arms industry, from within Germany's own economy. This is aimed at, I think, those countries and possibly industries that might need something to back them up.
But don't we want them at least? I mean, one of the things that Putin has got to his benefit, which is that he's got 40% of government spending in Russia now on the military effort, but actually that's the only thing keeping his economy going at the moment. I mean, even Keir Starmer has said, actually, if we do boost defence spending, if a lot of that goes in Britain, that will actually be good for our economy. But if we're not getting help from this fund, not help from it, but if we're not able to...
Most of the European defence industries have got multiple outlets, and they're not just based in one country. So you would take the French company Thales, for example. Well, Thales has just got a huge order from the UK to produce more missiles for Ukraine. It was Thales that is producing a lot of the short-range air defence missiles, the Starstreak and the NLAW anti-tank missile. Their factories in Belfast.
Right.
It's coming into the United Kingdom. And actually, this would help Northern Ireland with what we've got with the EU, non-EU elements of what's going on in Northern Ireland. So there's so much in there. There's a lot being made of it for political capital from an anti-EU perspective. But actually, we're not in a position where we need to access it.
That's not a problem. OK, that's reassuring. And what do you make of Keir Starmer appearing on a nuclear sub today and going to the laying of a keel of the next generation of nuclear subs? A huge percentage of our very small spending in relative terms on defence is actually on our nuclear capability. It protects not just us, but whole of Europe. Realistically, does it not? As we've done many times before. You're welcome. But how significant is that?
I think it's very significant. It's sending a clear statement to Vladimir Putin. But again, it's something that the Prime Minister should do, because one of the first things a new Prime Minister has to do is to write a letter to the captains of these submarines to say, under these circumstances, this is what you're to do.
This is if you don't hear the Radio 4 Today programme, Pips, it's kind of the giveaway, isn't it? If London has been attacked, you believe there's been... these are the reasons and these are the targets
for what you to do.
It's an extraordinary letter to have to write, isn't it?
It is, and these submarines go out on long patrols. This is HMS Vanguard coming back from over 200 days of patrol.
But it wasn't meant to be that long. It's just we didn't have another one to replace it
with. Well, we do, but they're getting old, and that's why he went to the laying of the keel for the
laying of the keel is basically the first bit of the.
It's like putting the traditional foundation stone in a building, which has got this was laid by such and such. So it's the rubber stamping of the building.
It's funny actually. We've got a situation. We've got a Labour Prime Minister, and he's been making these benefit cuts, although they frankly don't barely add up to nothing in the big scheme of things. Talking about raising taxes, well, that's predictable with a Labour Prime Minister, and then discussing, talking about defence and sort of cozying up with Donald Trump. I think there must be an awful lot of Labour, more activists than voters, I think, because I think Labour voters are very similar to Conservative Reform and other voters in terms of, they want defence of their country. There's a reason why Jeremy Corbyn didn't get elected. If you're ashamed of your country, you don't believe in, the defence of our country and our flag, then people don't want to vote for you. But I think a lot of Labour activists, lots of Labour backbench MPs, very uncomfortable with this.
Hugely uncomfortable. And just look at the roasting that Diane Abbott gave him. Not on this, but Diane Abbott gave him a real roasting.
Does anyone really care? Even Diane Abbott, what Diane Abbott says?
No, but it's the fact that the mother of the house, this Corbynista who's been allowed back into the party, the last one's still standing. But there's still those individuals on the backbenches, and what the government is having to do at the minute is probably creating lots of little factions in the backbenches that are going to come back and bite them in the proverbial.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, isn't it? It really is. I mean, it is interesting. The benefit claimants, we're told £5 billion in welfare savings. This is just nothing compared to where we are. Yeah. And again, even the government's own predictions of how much disability claims and incapacity claims, I mean, call them what they will, but that's what they are, sickness claims, when they're predicted to grow by 15 billion in the next few years. This is only going to cut 5 billion. Yeah. So today it's still going to grow by 10 billion pounds. And by the way, all of the predictions previously have always been way below what they have actually been. There's nothing also to stop benefit claimants being able to get subsidised top of the range cars. So you put your £7,000 down yourself and you can get a 50 grand motor on the Motability scheme, all paid for by us. By the way, then your MOT, you can get your driving lessons for free. I mean, I'm sorry, this stuff is abject madness.
Well, it is, but again, a lot of this is being spun. And I got a message from a friend of mine today who is going through some very, very severe cancer treatment. Yep. He has worked the whole of his life all the way through PED.
And these are the people we want to make sure get help.
But because he's getting the help, he's entitled to the full element of PIP. And part of that, he says his take on it is he gets full PIP, which includes £300 per month Motability. He looked at using it to get a Golf like the one he's got at the moment, and there was an upfront payment, and that £300 per month would be deducted from his benefits. Yeah. If he wanted to get a BMW, yes, he theoretically can do that, but he has to put £3,000 up front, and then the costs get taken off his other benefits. Yes, but that's up front. But then he gets the other costs taken off his benefits. So it's not quite the same as you've been given it for free. He's losing the other benefits that he'd get in it. He said, look, he said, if I could have got a top of the range Beamer on the full entitlement of PIP, which I've got, I'd be driving it, mate.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But there are lots of other people who have different entitlements depending on what they need. Otherwise, that wouldn't be happening. 1 in 6 new cars that are sold currently are under this Motability Scheme in this country. We cannot have a country that is basically entirely disabled.
We've got too many people who are entitled to.
I mean, that's the issue. We need to make sure the right people are getting all the help that they need and not having to worry about putting the heating on if they're elderly or disabled or got a sick child or or going through cancer treatment and can't work. This is what a civilised country does. But again, it's amazing to see all the sort of the hand wringing that was going on in the House of Commons. Why would we have 1 million extra people? Have we uniquely among all Western countries been impacted by lockdown? Have we uniquely in this generation got so many more people who are apparently disabled and unable to work? And again, depression, anxiety, all of these other things, the ADHD, the autism, all of this. I mean, there was a stat about Oxford University, my alma mater, the other day, that 98% of those who applied claim to get extra time in exams, ADHD, get the extra time. Get 25% more time, a quarter more time than other students. We had a word for that in my day: cheating. Cheating. It's now the norm. My daughter is a highly academic selective school. You ain't in that school unless you can get straight A's. No one gets B's. They all get, honestly. And there are kids in that school who get, a huge number of kids who get extra time for exams. I'm sorry, because of their learning issue. I mean, I think this is just abject nonsense. I'm sorry. And there are people who genuinely do have those difficulties and genuinely need help. But when other people claim it, and a lot of middle-class parents do this, they sort of just get little Jane and little Johnny, a little bit extra. It's called cheating. I just don't know how these people sleep at night.
And again, benefits should be there for those that genuinely can't work through whatever conditions they've got and other sort of disabilities they've got. Or like my mate, who, for a short term to get through the illness because he's had to come out of work to get through the illness, and he will.
And he shouldn't be destitute because of that.
He will go back to work again and he's a net contributor in more ways than just financially.
I couldn't agree with you more. Let's come back also to our leading story. The question I'm asking people about is this biological sex being erased from official data. This is a new report handed to the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper yesterday, and basically saying, look, official data, whether it was the census, whether it's on data in the NHS, whether it's data on crimes committed, on people arrested, on their gender status when they're in court or in prison, in schools, in every area of our life now. Often the documents that you're given ask your gender, allow non-binary. And I prefer not to say other, all these different options, when actually the question needs to be, what is your biological sex? Are you male or are you female? Because that is what is relevant to whether or not you need to be called in for a prostate exam, a mammogram, or whether or not you should be put in a women's prison or a men's prison, whether or not you should be using the boys' toilets or the girls' toilets in a school. And we are distorting our data, the actual facts, in the name of being kind to trans people. This is a madness.
It's complete madness, and it's not gender ideology, it's gender militancy. And we need to call it out for what it is, because it's trying to impose things on the majority, and it's a very, very small minority, and a small minority of those that want to identify as something different by the way they dress and behave and everything else. They don't want it because it's making their lives much more difficult.
I don't even care if it's a tiny minority. I don't care if it was 1%, 5% or 80% of the country decided to change their gender identity. It still isn't true. And it still isn't a fact, and it doesn't change what you were born. But you're born a woman, you will be a woman, and you will die a woman. And in 200 years, if someone digs up your skeleton, they will know that you were a woman. End of, full stop, nothing to discuss. So it doesn't even matter whether it's 2 people who want to do this or 20 million people who want to do this.
But we're letting militancy influence so much of what's going on in society.
But how does that happen in an organisation? How does that happen where it happens? It's happened across the board in every public institution: judiciary, the police, the NHS, in science, in universities, the places where we kind of thought facts mattered, right? This is what they do. They do facts. Have you got cancer? Have you not got cancer? Facts are relevant. How is that able to take over and capture so many of the organisations which have a massive impact on our lives?
Ultimately, it comes down to two things. One, do the politicians think it's going to get them extra votes by trying to pamper out? And do HR departments think that they're being more inclusive by bringing in...
You don't get a job in an HR department unless you sign up to all this stuff.
And then what they do is those go out there and people outside recognise them, and they then try and reinforce and magnify that because they know it causes disruption in businesses, they know it causes disruption in politics. They can see it taking up so much time in society.
You mentioned a little bit earlier, just before the news, that you look at a lot of the woke causes that are being pushed, whether it's Black Lives Matter in the recent years, the trans ideology, green ideology, the net zero, full-on Greta Thunberg levels of religious zealotry, that actually all of these, whether they were created initially or whether they've been pushed when they've been taken advantage of by, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, our enemies are using this stuff against us. Of
course they are. They're reinforcing it. They're magnifying it. They're putting what catalysts that they can in to try and create more cracks, and they turn into fissures, and those fissures turn into political chasms between different parties. And you'll get HR departments will come down hard against people who are just trying to get on and do their job. And the same thing happens in politics. The same thing happens elsewhere.
And it does happen. I mean, when you've got sort of jet pilots, we've had this scandal emerge in the RAF. They're basically saying we need more women and other minorities. Well, women aren't, we're a majority of the population, but so you've got a white straight man who's applied for the job who just happens to be the best jet pilot applicant you've got, but actually someone who is black or Asian or claims to be trans or is a woman could actually get that role instead of them because of these characteristics.
And the Russians will be sitting there going, well, we've caused the UK to spend £2 billion a year on employing people to do all of this woke sort of stuff and all that. So brilliant, that's £2 billion they can't spend on weapons to deal with the threat that we've got.
And it undermines our society generally.
And that's what they want to do. So it's the old Chinese proverb of death by 1,000 cuts. No one little thing is going to cause you any particular damage, but start to put them all together and they all add up. And this is why we're seeing the militancy that is being stirred up by outside influences, because they can see how much it's disabling us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Philip Ingram, always good to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you as well, particularly on this issue about the government basically refuses to force the police and the courts to record biological sex. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, she's, as expected, an awful lot worse than the last Tory lot who were Eustace on this as well, but allowing criminals, even rapists, to be free to pick their own gender. Well, how they identify and whether they want to wear a dress or not is utterly irrelevant to whether or not they've committed a crime or been suspected of committing a crime. That matters when, biological matters in that, biological sex, matters in that case. It also matters in healthcare, in every other area of our life.